I have a confession to make. A couple of years ago now, I made this dark grey mottled wool skirt that I wear almost all the time when I'm up here in the workroom filming, because it's like wearing a nice warm woolen blanket and I love it. But there are some construction issues with it. Important things such as we humans aren't in 2D, so when you want something to conform to, the oval of a waist, you want to add things like on the top of the skirt panels, instead of having them cut straight like I did, you want to add a little bit of a curve, just so you don't get a lot of like puckering up and creases around the waistband. But most noticeably, I want to address the hem, which I didn't let hang for long enough after I stitched up the side seams, so that it didn't sort of adjust to the stretch of the bias and all those other things that a skirt tends to do. So the hemline is all over the place as a result of that, and I want to address that, straighten up the hem a bit, because I figured when I mess up in this way, surely I can't be the only one, so maybe someone else will also find some value in this video. But also, what better way to start 2024 than to take something we have been frustrated with and address it? So happy 2024 everyone, let's get out the seam ripper and get to work. I'm starting with the waistband, because we will have no way of straightening the hem until that sits the way we want. Apparently, you are supposed to use your seam ripper ball side in. Evidently, this lessens the odds that you end up tearing your fabric rather than just the threads. Still, if you, like me, had a little mishap anyway, we can amend that with some matching thread and darning. Especially for fuzzy, slightly felted wools like these, darning from the back is all but invisible from the front. This is what I meant when I talked about the waistband creasing, because this was cut straight and it should have a little bit more of a curve. But I at least can see, and I hope you can see too, that it has these pressed pleats into the front of it, and this is what we want to cut after, or at least like a little bit above to give room to the waistband. This is what I need to cut off so that it actually follows my waist and my shape in a more natural manner. So that is what we are about to do. I will also seam rip the hem straight away, even though we're not going to fix that first, because I have some uses for the ribbon on the bottom to help fix some issues in the top. Along the way, I found a small hole that, embarrassingly, looks so sharp it was probably a mishap with some scissors. Not one to be distracted, I mark it with some embroidery floss and carry on. First off, I am adding some ribbon to the tops of my pockets. These will be anchored in the waistband to help take some of the load off the side seam when carrying heavier things. The ribbon is also being put into the waistband itself, just to give it some more stability and added stretch resistance. And of course, no waistband overhaul is complete without reattaching the closures, so let us just get that out of the way as soon as possible. Waistband much improved, we can return to our luck of the workroom hole for another kind of repair. Here, a little patch of our fabric is attached to the back of the skirt with small hemming stitches, ideally catching only a few threads of our skirt at a time. This way, we minimize how much the patch shows from the front, although it will never be entirely invisible. Once attached, we can turn to the front side of our skirt and stitch our mishap safely to our patch friend. Now for what I have been somewhat anxious about, straightening our hem. Now, usually I would do such things as kindly asking another friendly human to help me out, but I know several of you do not necessarily have easy access to such things. But nor do I have access to an equally helpful hem marker. So, what can we do instead? Books. Books are always there for you when you need them. Okay, this is going to be far from ideal, but my theory is that since a hem marker works by adding chalk dust or pins at a set height, perhaps we can imitate that by wedging a tailor's chalk between some books and rubbing our skirt against that? If only my chalk wouldn't try to escape at the slightest application of pressure. I mean, to be absolutely clear, a hem marker or helpful friend is way easier than this. But if needs must, and then we pin up the excess and try to see just how far off we are. You know what? I deem that not too bad. And with our hem duly quality assured, we can go ahead and do the scary thing of cutting off the excess. Alright, now that we have addressed the rest of the issues with this skirt, it is now quite short, or at least shorter than I'd like it. So I thought we could add a bit of a ruffle at the bottom. And as tempting as it is to reach for the remainder of the bolt of cloth that this skirt came from, I also have, which Soot is sitting on right now, an old skirt that I made that is about knee length before I learned that I prefer skirts that are a bit longer than that. It also has some construction issues. It was one of the first skirts that I made after starting to sew again. So I thought it would be fitting if this became the ruffles. And you've seen me use the seam ripper so much in this episode that I figured you would forgive me if I took apart the things like the lining, because I didn't make a petticoat. I added a lining which made the skirt very heavy. Do not recommend. Pockets, waistband. It's just a short grey skirt that Soot has decided to take a nap on, so I shan't be showing it to you before we cut it. And also I have this rather long because this skirt had all the pleats. It's massive. A velvet ribbon that either we're going to use for other project later, or if we have the time, I thought we could add this to the bottom of our skirt that we are working on right now, because it's a nice black velvet trim. Let's be a little bit fancy. But I guess I shan't get anything done while my little darling is so very preferential to my wool skirts. I did quite like the length of the longest part of the skirt, so I am making sure to cut my ruffles at least that long, plus seam allowance. Since the old skirt was cut with plenty of pleats, I think 2 lengths will be plenty for a ruffle. And then we do our best to divide skirt and ruffle into equal segments before pinning down the ruffle, hopefully as evenly as possible all the way around. There is just something so deeply satisfying about taking something, especially something that you made but you're no longer happy about, and turning it into something new and glorious and amazing. And yeah, perhaps one day I will look upon this new skirt in a similar way to the old skirt, but for now, let us revel in taking something that was no longer serving us and turning it into something that will. I am doing the hem of the ruffle by machine as well, because there's a lot of it and because I can. This may seem a little hard to believe, but between Madame lying towards the middle of the skirt and our hem being dispersed around it, we were able to stitch it mostly without disturbing our sleeping dragon. Yeah, no. I had hoped that if it was just an inch or two, we could sort of shimmy the velvet ribbon a little bit up and get a little bit in each seam that way, but we are far too off to be able to do that. We'd end up with it somewhere in the middle of the skirt, which I don't think would look as nice, so velvet ribbon for another time, sadly. And with a wee bit of a press to finish us off. And I know this skirt has been in the background of my videos a bunch of times already, but now with extra added cat fuzz and pizzazz. Thank you for watching. If you wish to support me in making more videos, the best way to do so is over on Patreon, where I share some behind the scenes updates and other fun stuff.